Thanks for joining us on this episode of JB & Co. I'm here today with LinkedIn's CFO and SVP, Steve Sordello. Steve has held prior CFO roles with TiVo and Ash Jeeves, along with senior management roles with Adobe Systems and Syntax. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Thanks for having me, Jared. Appreciate it.
Of course. Now, Steve, I have to mention the fact that you went to Santa Clara just like I did. But before attending Santa Clara, you didn't know what you wanted to do in college. Your parents also didn't attend college, so you were kind of going to college trying to find your way. And I think a lot of us go through that same thing. When I was at Santa Clara, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do after college. And I also had a lot of friends at Santa Clara that didn't know what they wanted to do after college. So I want to ask you, since you were in the same situation, what do you do when, what advice can you give to a college student who doesn't know what they want to do with their future quite yet?
Yeah, this is, it's very relatable to me, as you mentioned. You gave a little bit of my background. I grew up here in the San Jose area, and my parents were fruit farmers, so neither of them went to college. My dad didn't even go to high school because he had to work. They were older parents, and they kind of grew up post-depression. And so when I was even in high school, I didn't, I kind of knew I was going to go to college, but it wasn't a focus area at all. So even in high school, my interests were primarily sports. I put all my energy. I played high school basketball, and just even pickup games. And I kind of stumbled into college in a way. I didn't have any prep. I started at San Jose State, actually. I applied right when I graduated. And I didn't know a clue what I wanted to do. I had, apologies, that's Norman in the back. One of the beneficiaries of COVID are the pets, like the dog.
I love it.
And so I started out, stumbled in areas I thought it might be neat to be a graphic designer. And then I transferred to Santa Clara. I had a passion to go to Santa Clara, and I started to focus a lot on academics. And for me, and I would give this advice, in the moment, it is confusing. And I think it's important to allow yourself to explore different things in that period and not really put a lot of pressure. I think it's important to have goals in life, but I think it's also to have perspective on the long game, and you'll eventually stumble into something. For me, it was stumbling. I followed my brother. He was an accountant. I tried that. I didn't like accounting, but I found out I really liked economics. I liked business. I liked finance. I liked the management case study approach. And that's where I started to have my interest and get along a path. But I think it's allowing yourself to explore. I think if you're graduating, I think it's, still exploring and starting to look at what are the trends, that you're seeing in the future. A lot of change happening right now across many dimensions, and just learning, getting out, talking to people. One of my challenges is I'm very much an introvert. I've always been on the shy side. I was voted the shyest kid in junior high school, type of thing. So my challenge was even getting out and talking to people and learning and making connections. But that's something I would always advise, because, even in terms of finding opportunities, that's where usually it comes from. It comes from making connections with people. And that not only helps with opportunities, but it helps identify what you might like by hearing other people's stories.
Exactly.
So, that's what I would advise. It's never easy. And for me, I feel fortunate in many ways that I did find a path. But I think exploration is good.
Yeah. No, I think you bring up a great point. I think while I was at Santa Clara University, one thing that I learned was connecting with others is probably the best thing you can do for yourself, whether it be with other students or with the alumni. It'll set you up for a future where at least you'll have a base of strong people that you can go to whenever you need advice or whenever you need to learn anything. It can help you out in the long run. So I think, just like you, I was a little shy when I went to Santa Clara, but I think by breaking out of my shell and doing things that I probably wouldn't have done my freshman year, I think that's what has led me to the point that I am today. So I think that's great advice that you gave there. And to go along with that, you also, Steve, while you were at Ask Jeeves, at the age of 30, you were kind of thrown into the fire. You were handed the keys to the car as you had an exiting CFO on his way out. You were appointed the new CFO at age 30. And of course, it was during a pretty tough time. I remember you mentioning that it was during a time where you had to let some people go and there were some angry shareholders. What is the best guidance you can give to somebody who's just thrown into a situation? Because I know that I've been in that situation before. It's like, okay, you're on a team with a bunch of great basketball players, and all of a sudden your name gets called and you have to go out there on the court, and you can't be pressured, but you also have to, stay mellow, and you have to know that you belong here. So you eventually have to just step up and perform. So I wanted to ask you, what's the best guidance you can give to somebody who's just thrown into a situation that they didn't expect?
Yeah, and maybe to provide a little context in that situation, because it was a very life-changing moment for me. I was at a company that had a lot of problems under the hood. Culturally, wasn't a great place to work. Didn't really have a business model. This is when I joined, but had a veneer of a lot of hype in the .com era, and it went IPO, hugely successful IPO. It was the third largest IPO percentage increase at that date. But under the hood were a lot of problems. And when the .com crash happened in kind of the spring of 2000, kind of everything imploded. And the CFO left, and there was me and the controller. The controller was actually interested in the job, and I was actually trying to help her get the job. And what transpired was a management change from the board coming in and replacing the CEO. And out of the blue, he asked me to be CFO. And it was quite a shock to me. I was at a stage in my career where I really didn't have the experience, and I was very fearful. There, was a situation, as you mentioned, where the investors weren't happy. It was a definite turnaround situation. We had to let go of people from the business model perspective. We had to buy technology. There were a lot of challenges. And then even interpersonally with the controller and some of the team dynamics. And I looked at the situation, and I actually had another opportunity somewhere else. And I kind of calculated that the company's success, maybe even just surviving, is probably 1 in 10. And for me personally, me being successful and not getting fired is probably 1 in 10 chance. And I looked at it, and I got advice from others, and most people told me to take the other job because, this was a company that had 80 million in the bank, but the market cap was 30 million, which means everybody expected to just go out of business. And I looked at the situation, and I thought to myself, even with, a little bit of risk averse background, like this is an opportunity I cannot not try. And it's kind of maybe in terms of metaphor for sports, it's kind of like, if you're given the ball, take it. If this is an opportunity, and I think what I learned in that environment is, clearly it's easier to lead in the good times than in the bad, and that's where things really show. But there's also opportunities in the bad time to really have impact. And I think listening, understanding, leading in a different way. But I think the most important thing, because again, I could have very well went the other way, is to take the chance when you're given it. That literally changed the trajectory of, and it ended up being a really successful turnaround. That's at its core, is kind of just take it and go for it. If I failed, I failed, right? But in the long run, you get few chances like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's great. We can't be afraid to fail in life, or else we won't get to where we truly want to be. And in doing this show and interviewing you today, I definitely want my audience to learn from you. And I think you're giving us great points. And it almost seems you can agree with me if this is true, but true growth comes through adversity. So where you are today, you may not be where you are today if it wasn't for that situation. Now you're a smart man, so I have no doubts about you, but I'm saying the adversity that you faced during that situation ultimately made you stronger, smarter for the next situation that you were in after that.
Definitely.
For
I
sure.
completely agree with that. I think most of progress happens in times where you don't feel comfortable.
Exactly. Now, Steve, I don't know if you have much time to watch Netflix, because I know you're a busy man, but I know I watch a lot of Netflix. I had the opportunity to watch the documentary called The Social Dilemma. In The Social Dilemma, it explores the rise of social media and the damage it has caused to society. It also touches on how the algorithms powered through AI are used to prime and somewhat addict us to the social media platform. Now, the platform that you work for in LinkedIn, they were just voted 3 years in a row, the most trusted platform. So I want to first ask you, what was your initial reaction to the documentary, if you saw it, and how does a company like LinkedIn do so well with their users' trust?
Yeah, I did watch the documentary. I watched it with my family, which was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And the content in it wasn't new to me. It's something that, we've struggled with as a family. If I go back, I wish I would have done things differently with my kids in terms of devices and stuff. Once you go down a track, it's hard to undo. And it's a different world today in terms of their experiences versus how we perceive it. But I think the most compelling part of that movie for me that came across was when you have the people that built the products
Mm-hmm.
talking about how they're not letting their kids use it.
Exactly.
Or the danger to society. That really resonates.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 15 or so years ago, when a lot of these social media companies were formed, including LinkedIn, again, first of all, there's a lot of positives to social media. I mean, connecting people, friends, family, all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of positive. But when they were formed, it was difficult to see these unintended consequences. Most of the things that you're doing are free flow of information. You're providing more and more relevance to
Mm-hmm.
what people are interested in and giving them more of that, which sounds positive, right? If you do a Google search, you want to get the most relevant result.
Mm-hmm.
But what we didn't see was these unintended consequences of everything from, bullying to FOMO, fear of missing out, to like anxiety issues in terms of behavior, to these filter bubbles where you have people getting content that they only agree with, and you're not getting the discussion,
Mm-hmm.
which is obviously playing out in a very material way and is unhealthy. And so all those dimensions. And the companies are all struggling with it. Now, LinkedIn is a social network, so we have those similar challenges, right? We have users on the site, they're contributing. I think for us, one of the natural barriers in terms of helping in this regard is we focus on professionals. And so when people come to LinkedIn, generally, they're representing themselves professionally. And there's a natural inhibitor there in terms of sharing or discussing in any sort of content that's more on the inappropriate side. So that's kind of a natural barrier. I think we also, as a company, we realize very early how important trust is with our members.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of our key operating priorities. So we have talent, we have technology, we have trust, we have member experience and customer experience, and they all interrelate with each other. And that's just, if we don't have member trust, we have no site.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also focused on the business model side.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the other social platforms are dependent on engagement, right? It's your business builds, it's an ad business. So the more people are engaged, if you can game them into looking at their phone more often, or sharing more articles, or sharing things that are clickbait, that get more, spread of information, that's fundamental to the business model proposition. And I think at LinkedIn, our philosophy has always been, we don't want to be a place where you go to pass the time. We want to be a place where you go to save time. It's about productivity. It's about getting interactions that help you very efficiently, effectively, whether it's helping you get a job, whether it's helping you start a company, whether it's helping you get advice, a mentor, whether it's reading content that's appropriate to your career. We want that to save you time in the long run. And it comes down to, I think, the business model. I think the healthiest business models in terms of doing good in the world, I think every company likes to have a mission that says they're changing the world, right? They'll find some aspect of their business. But when you truly have a business model where when the business does better, the kind of impact to society does better, that's beautiful, right? You don't have those inherent conflicts of, for our business, we need to drive more engagement. So let's get this addictive behavior going. And I think LinkedIn very much so fits in that. And that's one of I think the real purposeful, powerful aspects of it. The better the business does, the better it is for the world in terms of helping economic growth and helping people, grow in their career. So I think that's fundamental. And we're also just very focused on, again, it's hard. We leverage some of the same technologies that are done on the counter side to try to best ensure that inappropriate behavior is not happening, that we want dialogue, we want professional constructive dialogue. And so we kind of really try to enforce that as best we can. But I think at its core, it's the symbiotic business model relationship that really helps us in this regard.
Yeah, I think you guys do a great job at enforcing the rules, but like you said, with your business model, everybody who is a part of LinkedIn, all your members, they're there, they're there promoting themselves as a brand. So when they get on the site, they're not going to do anything to harm that or to throw dirt on their name. So that's why I think LinkedIn is a very strong social media platform, and why it's been successful for so long, and why it has its users' trust. So that makes complete sense. And since you've talked about LinkedIn so much and its goals and objectives, I do want to ask you, when Jeff Weiner became the new CEO in 2009, he asked you, what should LinkedIn be? And your reply was, quote, LinkedIn should be a site that if you don't visit it every day, you'll feel you're not doing your job. From the moment you and Jeff had that conversation until now, how do you feel LinkedIn has accomplished its goal?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually surprised that got out there as much as it did. Again, a little context. That was the first time I've ever met Jeff, and it was at a little bit awkward time. We were going through a CEO change, and I had been at the company about a year and a half, and I met him at a Starbucks, and he asked me that question, and I had never really thought about it, and I kind of said it in a little frustrating way, and the reason it came out that way was because LinkedIn, especially at that time, the perception of LinkedIn was you only go there if it's a job, right? If you're looking for a job, or it's an online Rolodex, or it's for these hardcore networkers, the guy who's passing out his business card, the annoying guy. And actually, at the time, many CEOs of companies didn't want their employees on LinkedIn because it was viewed as, why would I want them? They're just going to get poached.
Yeah.
And to me, it was frustrating because I wanted us to make that turn, the mindset of how you use LinkedIn. If you flip it to, you have this enormous reservoir of knowledge and access all of a sudden. And for me, it played out in a few early examples when I needed to hire a critical person. I could find them through LinkedIn, not in a job posting, but through my network. Or I needed some tax advice in terms of setting up a tax structure. I'd never done it before when I started at LinkedIn. And I reached out to someone who knew, who connected me with another, free advice, and really helped me out. And it's this mindset of flipping how you use LinkedIn in terms of almost like a killer app in terms of making you more productive.
Yeah.
And from a company perspective, that statement from CEOs, it's like the exact opposite. Is why wouldn't want you all your employees? You have all these assets in the company that you create value with, and you're ignoring this massive asset that all your employees can tap into in a very productive way. You're not doing that's a huge competitive advantage if others do that. And so it was like one of these things where we need to shift the mindset. And in terms of how we've done, it's been a curve that has been very flat, and then more recently has started to really compound. And we're still not there. Like we're still not like where someone's sitting there and they're coming in the morning and going like, oh, I got to turn to LinkedIn, and because otherwise I'm not doing my job appropriately. But it's happening behind the scenes. We're seeing people that understand the value props use it a lot more. And so it's happening. I don't know if it'll ever get to the stage where the mindset is that, but I think it's playing out underneath the scenes where people are recognizing the value and they're using it. And we're seeing that accelerate. So that's where it came from. And I had forgot I'd even said it. And we were at a conference and Jeff brought it up like a few years later that he remembered that. And so it kind of stuck, and I still kind of use it as a goal, like the mindset of people going on LinkedIn.
That's awesome. Yeah, Steve, I have to tell you, if I don't know where I fall on the data, but if you were to look at my usage rate on LinkedIn for the last 2 years, I shot through the roof. Like LinkedIn is a platform that I visit every single day. It has helped me connect with people for things that I like to do outside of basketball, this show being one of them. And, I've, at a certain point when I first got to Santa Clara, I never looked at it that way. Although they got us into, everybody should have a LinkedIn. I got one, but I didn't really know what to use it for. I didn't know how to use it. I was like, okay, we'll just have it here. But over the last 2 to 3 years, my usage rate has gone through the roof, and I've loved my time on LinkedIn. And I feel like exactly what you guys say it's meant to be is exactly what it does. And I've gotten all the benefits from it. So I definitely will continue to use it. And it's definitely taken the place of several other social media sites that I used to use a lot more. So I wanted to let you know that.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear, Jared.
Yeah. Now, Steve, as you know, COVID has presented unusual circumstances, not just for 2020, but for the future. In what ways has the pandemic caused you to have to reforecast budgets? And I ask that meaning, like, say we were to look at the NBA today. Of course, we didn't know that this pandemic was going to hit. So obviously, the owners, the league, and the player's salary had to take a hit. And unpredicted costs came into the picture, such as creating a bubble in Orlando, such as daily COVID testing. All those things that we didn't account for in the beginning of the year are now issues today. So with LinkedIn, how have you had to reforecast your budgets?
Yeah, it was a pretty big shock in March. We had some pretty aggressive targets. We were marching along very well. And it hit. And, for a business like ours, we are in many ways very correlated with the economy. Like our business is jobs, right? Hiring, advertising, sales. We have these different lines of business that are all very correlated with economic activity. And so when there's a shock, it has the potential to really dramatically change our outlook. And so we tried to really jump in front of it. We're in a position, fortunately, where it's not existential for us. Like we have huge assets. We're part of a massive company. We're very profitable already. But it was really more from a business perspective. Like how do we navigate through this pretty dramatic change? And it did have a big impact on our numbers. And originally in terms of our outlook. And we, from a business perspective, we reacted in all the ways that you would normally react in terms of variable cost reductions, and some things were naturally reduced, like travel and things like that. But what we also did was try to use it as an opportunity to kind of accelerate strategic changes. We actually did have a reduction in force, but it was isolated to areas where we were making business changes anyways, and or where there was like a definite link in terms of direct demand. So it was relatively small, and we executed through that. Now, my belief going into this, which I talked about with the company, I've been through, this is my 4th recession now. And usually what happens, and some of them have been in environments where we don't have the assets that we do right now. What usually happens for companies that execute well is they focus on the things that matter most. They get better. They get stronger when they come out relative to everybody else. And I really think that's what's happened with LinkedIn. We also have been fortunate in another way. I think the reality of kind of the impact of this recession is not equal. And what you see is many of the tech companies doing really well, because there's been an acceleration of digital transformation. Like all of a sudden, a lot of stuff that was moving along just sped up, and people are on video, they're leveraging technologies differently. Companies are purchasing different ways to accelerate that piece of their business. Well, the other side, retail, travel, small and medium mom and pop businesses are devastated. And so it's this kind of, they talked about the K recovery, right? It's kind of that in some ways. And so, one of the things that it's really an important time to, this is where LinkedIn's kind of purpose of economic opportunity and trying to drive that is how do we help get through this? Because I do think for LinkedIn, some of the actions we made did put us in a position where we're much stronger now. And then there was just the other side of it, the digital acceleration, which is benefiting some of the tech companies. So that's how I would answer. We did react. We pretty dramatically in a few areas, but it was more focusing. It was more focusing on the things that really matter.
Well, that's good that you guys have a plan moving forward and hopefully bounce back after this is all over, hopefully in due time. Now, Steve, there are a lot of tech stack services out there that companies utilize. How has tech stack services helped LinkedIn run its business? Such as, you hear about companies like Workday, you hear Slack with internal messaging, Sprinkler. All of these companies help another company run its daily task. So how do you guys look for other tech stack services to help you run its business?
Yeah, I mean, the technologies I was talking about, digital transformation, these technologies that companies are utilizing to run their business, over the years, they've only accelerated in terms of impact. And, being on the right ERP, enterprise resource planning system, versus not is a magnitude impact. Having the right data analytics systems to understand, particularly a business like LinkedIn, we're very data driven. We need the right platforms. In terms of just the ability to scale, in the very early days of LinkedIn, every Monday or Tuesday, our site would go down. We couldn't handle the traffic. And it's much smaller traffic back then. We'd have to throttle in terms of slow down activity on LinkedIn. It's how do you scale that? And over time, we've leveraged different technologies. More recently, we built a lot of homegrown stuff. The next big one is moving to Azure in the cloud, which that in itself has a lot of inherent benefits and leverage in terms of different capabilities that are related to machine learning and artificial intelligence. In terms of other apps, obviously video has become much more relevant in terms of how we're all working together. And, you know, I think most companies have found that they haven't really taken a productivity hit.
Mm.
It is really more on the well-being side
Mm.
of you know, the employee base is you're used to that collaboration in a different way and the spontaneity of meeting with people at the office. But using tools like Zoom or Teams or Slack, you know, all those types of tools. I think, you know, what's coming is more areas like synchronous video, where, you know, you're kind of like leveraging different way, interviewing in a different way, and so yeah, definitely, I think a lot of these platforms are still evolving, and I think with COVID, it's only going to accelerate, because there's all going to be all this business need to solve some of these challenges of flexible work and how do you optimize people who are in a remote environment. But yeah, it's definitely, you know, over the years at LinkedIn, you know, we've taken advantage of different platforms, some homegrown, some external.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned while you were talking that, you know, being at home, how is everybody doing? The employees doing? How is their mental state? You know, everybody's communicating over Zoom these days rather than in person. So I know that I've had the opportunity to talk to several different people about how they're doing. So I want to ask you, how is it for you, being at home more than usual? Is it something that you like? Because some people like it, but then there's some people that are like, okay, enough is enough. It's time to get back in the office. I need to interact with people face to face. Where do you fall on the spectrum?
I think like most people right now, it's in between. It's a hybrid. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, early on, I think there was like almost like this, oh wow, this is great. I'm home and it's working and I don't have a commute. And, you know, then we hit a point where people started to miss people.
Yeah.
And it started to be like, when are we going back? You know, we have a lot of like, you know, food and, you know, just stuff where people get this tangible experience. Mm-hmm. And I think the result of all of this is people want the best of both worlds now. Mm-hmm. You know, I think what's going to come out is people are going to want to work from home a few days a week and go into the office a few days a week. They're going to want flexibility, which is going to create a behavioral change on both the person and the company side, because a lot of people probably won't have a set desk. You know, you have to coordinate when teams get together in a way, you know, that makes sense. You know, in terms of people coming to the office, you don't want everybody not coming on Friday, right? You want to have some sort of a flow. So that's where I think it is. But I do think there's a yearning right now for more normalcy. Mm-hmm. You know, it impacts everybody differently. Obviously, I'm relatively fortunate. I'm down in a basement with my dog, and I don't have a lot of noise around me. You know, and our kids are a little older now, so we don't have that much challenge. Still some, because they're zooming into high school. So, but for some, it's a real challenge, and for others, it's a isolation issue. Mm-hmm. You know, which is a whole nother area that, you know.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I know when you read about the reports with everything going on and people working from home, you hear about how divorce rates are going up and about how abuse rates are going up. So it's like, you know, it's kind of like in between, and, you know, some, you know, people like it half the time, then half the time people need to get out the house so we can be free and get our space again. Yeah. But you said something that was interesting again, which was the fact that, you know, companies may have to do something differently moving forward. So based off of what you said, do you see the landscape of the way companies do things changing forever? Or do you think it'll be something where it'll just be for a period of time until we get things completely back to normal? Or do you not see any normal anymore?
No, I think there'll be some new normal, but I don't know. The thing is, I don't know if people really know right now. I think this is like an experiment in a lot of ways. I do think there will be fundamental change. I think, you know, at LinkedIn, we're kind of approaching, for example, you know, the work at home, work in the office thing in an iterative stance, trying to learn what do we do when someone wants to work remote? You know, we're used to having people in the office, and it has costs and benefits. Like the costs are collaboration, maybe innovation, no one knows long term. The benefits are it's easier to recruit. It helps with a number of areas, potentially solving diversity, other challenges in terms of being able to go where talent is. And so there's a lot of benefits. And then I'm on a board of another company that has taken a stance that they're going to be anywhere. They're going to allow employees anywhere under certain, kind of frameworks. But so I don't think there's a really going back fully because we've learned something new. But I do think there, like everything, you're in a moment of time, and it seems like like when I mentioned early in the pandemic, it felt like, oh, this is great. We can do this all the time. It gets to another stage and it gets to another stage. And I think it'll take like a few years before we really know what's the new normal.
Yeah. All we can do is guess. And that's what everybody's been doing for the last, 7 or 9 months. Now, Steve, I know you're a fan of sports, and you actually had the opportunity to watch me play a few times while I was in college. In your opinion, what skills do you think are most necessary for athletes to carry over from sports as they go into the corporate world?
Yeah, and Jared, I loved watching you. I still watch the Santa Clara guys. It's my heart rate always goes up when I watch. They're 5-0 now. They have a tough division. That'll WCC's gotten a lot better, so it'll be fun to watch. I think in terms of sports, I think there are a lot of carryovers. And, I think the one thing, maybe if I bucket it in a few categories where I think there's a natural carryover from athlete to corporate to success. And one is, I always bucket things, when you think about like traits, you think about someone's intelligence, their IQ. Mm-hmm. And like, I think for mostly that, if you tie that to an athlete, there's definitely IQ, but there's also like the traits you have, how tall you are, how fast you are, mm-hmm. Those capabilities, those innate capabilities. But then there's EQ, mm-hmm. right? And that's the ability to interrelate with people. And that's so important in the corporate world. I think it's underappreciated, the ability to listen to someone, understand their perspective, and business partner with them in a way where you're able to persuade when you need to, with the context of really what they're trying to solve. And in an athlete's world, collaboration, teamwork is a natural, right? It's just a natural. And so I think that's a big piece. The third one, I think maybe the most important, and that's the adaptability quotient, kind of agility. And in the corporate world, I think I'm definitely not the smartest person in the room. I think I try to have strengths that compensate. And I think one of the most important things is being able to adapt, like being able to adapt to someone else's style, their personality, the situation, and work through people and with people, and almost change your approach. And I think from an athlete's perspective, clearly, right, you're constantly adapting to different players in terms of their style, their skills. Sometimes you have to play a different role or carry the weight in a different way, different opponents, their quality. If you're a football team, you have to play in the snow, right? You have different conditions. And so I think that's just that mindset of carrying that over all three of those dimensions, I think is huge. I'd say the second would be resilience. And I think, success equals resilience divided by failure. Mm-hmm. And I think in any environment you're in, and if you're an athlete, you lose, right? You lose in life. There's no team or person that wins all the time. You get injured. You have to come back. And it's that resilience, I think, that carries it forward. And then lastly, obviously, is hard work. And I think the metaphor here ties to practice, right? It's like, it's kind of like, this sounds like, work hard, play hard type thing in sports. It's kind of like you don't get anything unless you work hard and you work hard at it. And I think people remember, they tend to remember the big moments, like, the slam dunk. But getting all those little things right along the way and practicing and making you better and better are the things that people don't see. And in the business side, it's the same thing. You see the big innovation, but you don't see the day in and day out that builds that. And so I would say those three categories, the work hard is kind of a no-brainer, but it's something that is obvious, and athletes have that in spades, right? Especially the good ones that practice.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, Steve, you hit it, right on the head. I think you would be able to come over to the basketball side if you wanted to, because you've got it all nailed down. I think, you said people only see the big things. They don't see the small things, So if you were to have, like you said, a guy dunk a basketball, they maybe didn't see the nice pass that came before it, or the screen that happened before it, or the guy who cut through the basket that made the other guy open. So you bring up great points, and I think maybe me and you can flip-flop. Maybe you can play basketball and I'll come work at LinkedIn.
Unfortunately, I'm not good enough. I wish I was. I really do. It's one of those, it's interesting for me. I loved it so much in high school, and it was my purpose. And then when I got to college and I didn't have it anymore, I shifted more, and that's when I shifted more to really applying myself. It's, if the extra thing, if you're passionate about something, it's easier to be, hard work at it. So that's another positive.
For sure. Well, if we have the opportunity, once things are normal again and we're allowed to travel as a basketball team again, and we're not stuck in a bubble, if we do play in California, I definitely would like to see you at a game. So I'll definitely let you know.
Awesome. I'd love that.
Now, Steve, as you know, a company's success relies upon the satisfaction of the customers. What impact has LinkedIn had on its members and its customers? And ultimately, how has that affected LinkedIn's bottom line?
I think if I take a big step back, because I think it's important, I talked about the business model. LinkedIn's mission is to connect the world's professionals to make them more productive and successful. And his vision is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. So one we're doing day in and day out, the other is like this huge aspiration. Mm-hmm. And I think what connects those two in the middle is we talked about social networks, and you may be aware of like a social graph, mm-hmm. which is the connections, and there's a professional graph, which was LinkedIn. A few years ago, we started talking about the economic graph. And what that is, it's basically when you think about these major pillars, where you start to think about how do we get every member of the global workforce on the platform. So today we're about 750 million. We aspire to have everybody, and not just professionals, but blue collar, everybody. Mm-hmm. And then how do you get every company on? Today we have about 55 million companies that have a company page. How do you get every job on? Today, there's about 15 million open jobs. How do you get every higher education or education? Today, I think we have 115,000 colleges and high schools on the platform. How do you get every skill? I think there's about 35,000 unique skills on LinkedIn today. And then how do you tie it all together with a platform of content sharing that facilitates? And by connecting all these nodes, but literally all these nodes and these separate pillars into one massive graph, what you start to enable is a free flow of capital. And when you think about flow of capital, it could be working, it could be financial, it could be human capital, it could be knowledge capital. And by doing that, it removes all this friction in a way where information is flowing very organically. So you could see, what are the jobs of today? What are the skills I need to fulfill those jobs? Where are the jobs? And so, we're working with governments and other countries. Another way where we're visually different than other social networks in terms of the output of our success in society. And customers are embedded in there, members are embedded in there. And I answered the question in this way is because the more successful we're at in doing that, it helps both the individual be more productive and successful, and it helps towards that aspiration vision of lifting. If you're able to remove all that friction, you all of a sudden increase GDP. You increase people's livelihood. You increase people's ability to scale and support their families. And that is the most important thing holistically. And we get that right. Like I said, the business model is very tied to doing that. We're very profitable. And then the engine of being able to reinvest in it, it's like this virtuous cycle, right? The more your business does well, the more revenue you have, the more you're focused, the more profit, the more you can reinvest. And that's really our goal. And so, the good news is we still have a long way to go. The good news is we've come a long way. I'm very proud of what the team has done in terms of delivering on so many value props. But that's how we create value for both members and customers is scaling that graph over time.
And Steve, and knowing that we know that many different social media platforms make an impact in some type of way. We know Twitter allows us to express our thoughts. We know Facebook allows us to stay connected with friends from way back in the day and family members. We know that Instagram allows us to express our feelings and our thoughts through photos. So I want to ask you, what contribution do you feel LinkedIn has had on social media?
Well, I think we're like you said, we're a different piece of what's being contributing in terms of the social media landscape. Everybody has a certain element of their value props that they're delivering. And, I think in many ways, Twitter is kind of like a soapbox, right? You get up there, you can distribute information very efficiently and effectively. Facebook's kind of like a backyard barbecue in my mind. It's like your friends and family, and LinkedIn's the office. And, so our focus again is on really driving people to allow to grow in their career, people allowing to get them jobs, helping form companies, allowing people to get mentorship, advice very efficiently and effective, help. And so it's really geared on the career side. And that's where we're focused. It's starting to broaden a little, as any social network, but that's kind of the core is your livelihood. And that's where we primarily focus.
I love the way you broke that down to make the distinction between the different social media platforms. Steve, throughout your career, you've had some pretty awesome achievements. You oversaw LinkedIn's IPO, which increased revenue from 15 million to 8 billion, along with having a significant role in the success since LinkedIn's $26 billion merger with Microsoft. And more recently, you were elected to Compass's board of directors. What's most exciting to you about this recent endeavor?
Well, it's interesting, the journey at my prior companies and LinkedIn. I feel just really fortunate in terms of, it's not always ups. It's a lot of ups and downs and a lot of challenges and a lot of stress, a lot of ways. But when you look at it holistically, it's just been tremendous and working with great teams. And so there's so many elements there. I think as I look, at doing different things, I'm on another board called Atlassian, which is in the collaboration space. And what I get from being on a board is it's almost like a lens into a whole nother way of thinking and doing things from other people looking at it from a different perspective than an operator. And the Atlassian board is just tremendous group of people, world class. And so every time I'm on there, I'm listening and learning new things and thinking, okay, how would I apply that? What's different? And so that's great. And so when Compass came along, the real reason why I decided to do it, it's different. I get a lot of very similar type of company board type of calls, and this was one in a different industry, real estate. And it's still a tech platform, which is interesting. And I thought that would just be fascinating to do something a little differently. I really enjoyed talking to the CEO, Robert, in terms of hearing his strategy and meeting the team. And those were all really important factors. But that aspect of doing something a little different and applying what I've learned in tech and in a social network and other environments to a little bit different model is fascinating to me. And so that's really what I'm looking forward to. And then, I'll add the other board I'm on is Santa Clara, which I just love being part of. I mean, a great group of people, a great purpose, mission, and so they're all a little bit different in terms of the focus areas.
So basically, once you master your industry, you would like to tell people, don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone and do something a little bit differently.
Yeah, and it's not just being afraid. It's also I think that's just healthy to grow, right? You're doing something different, and there should obviously be a benefit on both sides. You're bringing a different perspective, and I think that we were talking about filter bubbles earlier. I think the different perspectives of different ways of doing things and having the right group of people could potentially create just tremendous value. And so hopefully I'll contribute in different ways because of these different experiences, as opposed to just doing something similar and reapplying it.
Nice. The majority of us have people that we look up to or that we watch closely. If given the opportunity, who's one person you would want to meet and why?
I don't.
Some of us may not have one either, but if you do, I would.
Yeah. I would say, if I change the question a little, and in terms of people I don't interact with frequently because I learn from everybody, I really admire Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, I've met him, but I've never really sat down with him. And the reason why I call him out is he has, from everything I've seen in every experience, how he's kind of approached this LinkedIn acquisition, independence, and the philosophy. He has this really embedded growth mindset philosophy. And I think it's easy to say that you always approach things with the perspective that you have something to learn. But when you see someone apply it in such a way where it's every experience I've had, where he is in a mode, very extremely intelligent, could very easily give just his point of view and move on. He approaches it where he makes the other person feel. And not only feel, but he's actually, you can tell he's listening. Mm-hmm. And there's this humbleness that comes across, and it's not humbleness out of any sort of weakness, it's humbleness out of strength. And so I call it out just because it's like one of those areas I aspire to definitely have more of, is that growth mindset. And I've just seen him in meetings and in other interactions where he both makes the person feel like they're important, but he's really learning too. Mm-hmm. So that would be one. The other one I would just think of is a little bit maybe extremely different. Is like an Elon Musk. Mm-hmm. It's like extremely different management style. So it's not for the management. It's more for just the boldness. Yeah. Like the taking on massive industries and just going for it. Mm-hmm. So those would be the two that I, and again, one I have met clearly, but that's what those are two I would say.
I like those picks, and I'll share three of mine with you because I have three. Two are athletes, basketball players, Stephen Curry and Andre Iguodala. And not just because of the fact that they play basketball, but because of everything they do outside of basketball. As athletes, we always have this stigma that all we do is play sports and we can't really do anything else. And I like to watch them prove people wrong, and I like to prove people wrong myself. So, being able to watch them as I've grown up has been great for me. Steph Curry, who, most recently just interviewed our former president of the United States, Barack Obama, and being able to talk to him about, his life after the presidency and about his new book. And then having Andre Iguodala pretty much take his time in the Bay Area and capitalize on it by venturing out and meeting with different companies, meeting with different CEOs, and getting into the tech game. And you can see that he's really like taking a passion for it. So both of those guys have definitely done a lot more than just play their sports. So that's why those are two guys that I watch closely. And a third one, it's I do like Elon Musk, but I'm going to give you somebody who's kind of like Elon Musk, because he's a visionary and he's bold, but he's in the musical group. So if Kanye West, if you've heard of Kanye West, he started off, he's from Chicago, hometown. So, I've been rooting for him for a long time. And, obviously people always have something to say about others and how they may act or whatever, but that's not what I'm referring to. I'm just referring to the fact of his boldness and the fact that he always has a vision that anything he puts his mind to, he can do it. And, now he's a billionaire, and he works closely with Elon Musk because they're both the same type of person.
Yeah.
So those are three of mine, and I definitely like your two as well too.
Well, I'm sure you can get an interview with them too. I really believe that. I'm sure you can make it happen, Jared.
Hey, I'm just happy to be on here with you. Hopefully in the future that'll come. Now, Steve, we'll dive into our last segment, which we call On the Personal Side, in which I'll ask you 5 questions where hopefully my audience and I can get to know you a little bit better. Who's your mentor, and in a few words, how have they influenced you?
So I would say I don't really have a formal mentor. And, I think I've had different people in my life over time play mentorship roles at different times. I would call out kind of 2, I would say, more impactful. One was, we talked about that experience at Ask Jeeves I had. Mm-hmm. The board member that came off the board to be CEO, Skip Battle, he provided a lot of air cover for me. New CFO in an environment, very young. Investors had a reaction to a young CFO. Mm-hmm. And he would very clearly tell them, it's not the model, it's the mileage. It's not the year, it's experience. And just very business savvy, not in the operations as much, but just kind of the overarching advice when times were tough and helping navigate. So that would be one. The other one, which I would call a very, very important relationship, is with Jeff Weiner, my boss. And he has played a role on many dimensions for me. We worked very closely together for 11 years. He has a unique ability he's very compassionate and when he talks to you, he really, there's some people, well, they're just just go with your gut or just do what you think is the right thing. He will help frame the challenge, again, whether it's personal, professional, and show different paths, help you think through it. And I've never seen anybody like that. Like he's able to take a big step back, look at the big picture, take learnings he's had and his own experience, and really just provide. I've never seen the counsel before. Like when I turn to someone with something, it's always the really important stuff. It's him, and again, he's always so gracious and like I said, just really takes the time and cares as he does it. And so I would say he's not a formal mentor, but he probably plays that role for me as close as anybody right now.
Gotcha. A book you recommend and why?
I'm embarrassed to say I'm not I haven't in my life, I haven't been like one of those avid readers. Like if I could go back, I'd read more. I read, but I read news, right, and stuff like that. But I think more recently, I have been reading a little more. What fascinates me are books. I don't know if you ever heard the book *Sapiens*.
No, I haven't.
So it's probably like 5 years old or so, but it's basically a book about the history of humankind.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back and tells the story of how humans became from, all the way from ancestry force gatherers to where we are, how societies were created and what drove them, and differences in cultures, and ties things like how did society scale around, like you would think, like gossip and storytelling were elements that helped society kind of branch out, or these kind of I think it was like imagined realities, things like money or corporations. They're not like real things, but they're structures. And I think it kind of asked the question at the end, like, are we happier now that we've scaled versus when we were forest gatherers before? And based on all the stuff we've done technologically. So it's just a really fascinating read. And again, it's old, but that's the type of book I really go after, is that kind of learning about history and things.
Thank you. I'll be sure to check that out. If you were given the chance to go back in time, what would you do differently?
Well, I think this one is, it depends on how I look at it. There's always little things you'll do differently. I hope not to end, I think there's this vision you have in the future. You're sitting on your porch in your rocking chair, and you're at the point in your life where you hopefully don't have a lot of regrets, and you're using your memories as your, instead of going out and doing stuff. And so, there are always regrets here and there. I think for me, if I could go back, it would be, I think there's this combination of presence, like in the moment, and perspective. And I think I've struggled with both, is like, how do you enjoy the present and live in the moment without worrying about other stuff? And then how do you have perspective where you can almost kind of get out of your body and see the bigger picture? And, it's funny, my daughter, Vanessa, she'll be graduating this year from high school, but when her first year in high school, she had an assignment where it was ask your parent, what's one thing they want you to know as you go into high school? And I told her, I said, I want you to have perspective, because at this moment in your life, there's going to be all these things that seem like the worst thing in the world or most important thing in the world. You're going to see something on social media. You're going to see something that's going to upset you. And then like 3 years later, you're going to look at it and go, that was nothing. And so, and it's hard, right? It's easy to talk about it. It's hard to do it. But for me, if I could go back, and again, that's one of those things that's not a turn off, turn on decision. It's more of a mindset type of thing. Every day I try to get better at it. Like, how do I see the bigger picture? How do I, have that perspective? So that, I think that would be it.
Well, before I go to my last question, I just want to say that I really like that one, because I know I'm not old, but the older I've gotten, the more perspective I've gained. And with basketball and sports in general, you need a lot of perspective, because if you don't, just about everything will probably get on your nerves, especially with the politics of sports. So I'm able to play sports at ease now, which has helped me become a better basketball player by taking that stress off of me, by having perspective, by knowing why things work the way they do. And me understanding that I now know how to navigate the situation, so that way I can overcome the politics or overcome something that may not be fair. So having the perspective is key. So I'm so happy you said that, and I'm sure that other people will be as well too. The greatest business decision that helped propel your career forward?
I don't think there was any one. I think there, like I said before, I think there are a series of kind of these tent poles. Mm-hmm. And for me, being part of, when I was at Adobe, I got to be involved in, me and the GM acquiring Photoshop, got involved in launching a creative bundle, which was an MBA thing I was working on, and I took it to the company. Got involved in the distribution of Acrobat. I think those were kind of key things I talked about the Ask Jeeves, that decision to stay and do it. And then at LinkedIn, there were a series of, I think one was very early on. I was at the company about a few months, and we had about 10 million in the bank, and we knew we wanted to grow. And hiring people is a fixed cost, and we couldn't take the risk. And so I figured we needed to raise capital, and we went out and we raised about 75 million. It was at $1 billion valuation, which was a big deal back then. But we closed the last round right before Lehman happened, right before that collapse. And if we would not have done that, there was a lot of pressure on companies. Sequoia in DC had this rest in peace packet that was telling everybody to slash everything, go into hibernation. And we raised that capital, and it enabled us, we still relatively slowed down, but enables to continue to invest. And to this day, I think if we would not have raised that capital, LinkedIn wouldn't be what it is. Like, we would not have taken that share and moved. So that was a key one. There's several more around, like the IPO and some other things, but I'd say that was a key one in terms of a definite decision.
Mm-hmm. Last one for you. What thoughts can you leave us with to overcome the challenges of 2020?
I don't have anything philosophical. I don't think that like I said, it's impacting people differently. And, for me, again, relative, I'm an introvert. So some other people, like my wife, it's hitting harder. She's more extroverted. She's relying, she's meeting people and doing things. I just think at the end of the day, we're all, like I said, from a company perspective, we're all going to get stronger through this at the end of it in so many different ways. And so I think that's a mindset that I think relative to the pandemic, there's just going to be continued change. Hopefully we kind of get stronger as we go and learn new things. But that's probably it. That's probably the sentiment is we'll be better through it. It's like any adversity, right? You get through it, you get stronger, like we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. Well, that concludes this episode of JB & Co. with Steve Sordello. Thanks for allowing us to spend some time with you, and thanks for allowing us to highlight the great work that you've done. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jared. Look forward to seeing you on the court.
Thank you. And to my audience, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.